Okay, today is February 27th, 2022, and we'll make two presentations on two architects. The first one is Rudolf Steiner, who was not really an architect, but he built, and he built in interesting ways. So let's read a little bit about him. Rudolf Joseph Lorenz Steiner was born on the 27th of February or 25th, Wikipedia says, and died in 1925. Was an Austrian philosopher, social reformer, architect, esotericist, and claimed clairvoyant. Steiner gained initial recognition at the end of the 19th century as a literary critic and published philosophical works, including the philosophy of freedom. At the beginning of the 20th century, he founded an esoteric spiritual movement, anthroposophy, with roots in German idealist philosophy and theosophy. Other influences include Goethean science and Rosicrucianism. In the first, more philosophically oriented phase of this movement, Steiner attempted to find a synthesis between science and spirituality. His philosophical work of these years, which he termed spiritual science, sought to apply the clarity of thinking characteristic of Western philosophy to spiritual questions. Differentiating this approach from what he considered to be vaguer approaches to mysticism. In a second phase, beginning around 1907, he began working collaboratively in a variety of artistic media, including drama, the movement arts, developing a new artistic form, eurythmy, and architecture, culminating in the building of the Goetheanum, a cultural center to house all the arts. This is the house where he was born, and the bicycle didn't belong to him, I think. This was him as a young man, and quite an interesting person and thinker and doer. Austrian, of course. I say of course because Austria is quite good at provocative cultural actions. Sometimes not only cultural, as we know. And but Rudolf Steiner, I think, if he thought of spiritual science, he probably also thought of what we might call a spiritual architecture. But a spiritual architecture which was to be built at a time of decreased spirituality. So this makes his work, I think, rather interesting. I presented his work a few years ago simultaneously with the works of Wittgenstein, also a philosopher who built. And maybe we need architects who are also philosophers, and philosophers who also try to do, meaning to build, although maybe we should abstain for a while from building. This is what he says about education, which is, I think, a thought that deserves attention. Our highest endeavor must be to develop free human beings who are able of themselves to impart purpose and direction to their lives. The need for imagination, a sense of truth, and a feeling of responsibility. These three forces are the very nerve of education. He was very, very interested in education. If we do not believe within ourselves this deeply rooted feeling that there is something higher than ourselves, we shall never find the strength to evolve into something higher. Another quotation from him. Now the Goetheanum. In fact, there were two Goetheanums built, one that was damaged by fire, and then a second one. We'll take a look first at the first Goetheanum, which was this one. And this is an architecture of a non-architect, but the non-architect, I think, had a vision which is not to be ignored. The first Goetheanum, a timber and concrete structure designed by Rudolf Steiner, was one of 17 buildings Steiner designed between 1908 and 1925. It was intended as a Gesamtkunstwerk, the synthesis of diverse artistic media and sensory effects infused with spiritual significance. This is the second one that he built, because the first one, as I said, was damaged by fire. But we are going to look more in detail at this building. This is another building from 1914, the building that contains the boiler for the hot water. So, an utilitarian building, but you'll see that the architectonic expression is not utilitarian at all. In his form follows function method, the building is dominated by the smokestack, while the two qualified towers in the front are reminiscent of boilers. Here it is. Now, who would do today such a building, for this function, a boiler for the hot water system? This is almost inconceivable by most architects and most schools of architecture. But this is because we don't think any longer in symbolic terms. We are pragmatic practitioners concerned only with logistics and cold-blooded rationalities. But we forget the symbolic function of a building, and even a boiler should not neglect what we call symbol. Yes, maybe there is a certain naivete, especially at the bottom, but it still has it's still a unique vision here, and I think the building still stands out. Well, maybe all too well because of its height and so on. I find it interesting, and again, I think we need the innocence of those who are not trained as architects, because those who are not trained by architects have sometimes, at least sometimes, a vision to which trained architects do not have access any longer. This kind of building, I think, adds to the mystery of the world instead of decreasing it, as most of us are very busy working on. I mean, even these, so-called details, the entrance door, the window above, they are crafted in a certain way. There is a certain character here. Now, maybe, the stair is a little bit questionable from a Neufertian point of view. It's okay, it's okay. But still, I think the building, despite its, maybe a certain appearance at the bottom of being a gingerbread house, what is happening at the top is not at all, gingerbread. So it's this mixture between audacity at the top and a certain maybe naive domesticity at the bottom. But still, the building becomes a sculpture and is still striking. How many boiler rooms in the world are striking architecturally? I'm not sure there are many. I don't think there are many. Anyway, this is just one of those many buildings he built. And of course, the most important is the Goetheanum. And we are going to see it in detail. But even, even the rail, the handrail, the parapet of the stair it has character. It is designed with a maybe unique design. So he was a good designer. Now, another building from 1915, 1916, Let me see. It's this building here. I don't know its function because I don't know German, unfortunately. But in this case as well, the building has an increased level of domesticity or déjà vu at the bottom. But then the roof is telling a different story. The roof becomes both more organic and more abstract. And this is probably appropriate for many buildings because the roofing is the coiffure of the building, so to speak. Again, we are dealing with an architect who didn't receive training in architecture and who was actually a philosopher, a thinker, an educator, but he was not trained in practical arts, in applied arts. It's interesting, even the way he conceived these three steps here, turning them left and right in this way, and he tried to do something there. It wasn't just utilitarian three steps and that's it. Now, it's interesting that on the same day, there were two architects so very different born, although, yes, not the same year. The one I'm going to talk about next is very different from Steiner. And maybe it would be interesting to compare their works. Anyway, this is a model. And let's read here. This is another early plastic model for this building, designed 1921, 1922. It might be that architects who are not trained as architects have a more open mind towards symbolism and metaphor. It's possible because we see even here, it's the front elevation of the building is rather, imposing, and it has it's almost it has a certain mystery about it. There is a Gothic element also present, I would say. But when you talk about spirituality, it's almost inevitable to descend on the spiral of time before the Renaissance, when faith, collective faith, was undisputed and unquestioned and unquestionable. Now, this building or became, no, I think it was from the very beginning some kind of a hostel for people coming to this campus with buildings, dedicated to maybe the re-spiritualization of life. He had many followers and people, well-to-do people who contributed with money and with work as volunteers. It was a spiritualist movement, and architecture, of course, was necessary, and it became the expression of their philosophical and spiritual concerns and ideas. He also designed furniture. This presentation on him, I will end with some pieces of furniture he designed. Now, things like this you would expect today because of parametric design and so on. But at that time, everything was done manually. And I don't know exactly how he worked, if he provided handmade drawings, like accurate working drawings. I don't know. This is another building for the art workshop where the glass window or the first Goetheanum were built. So the glass windows of the first Goetheanum were built here in this building. Interesting. Now the transformer house on the left, the second Goetheanum on the right. This is the transformer house. Itself rather interesting. And here is the second Goetheanum, the largest building he built. So yes, another utilitarian structure, but it makes you stop and it makes you think. And it has also aesthetical concerns. And it is as you see it. As opposed to the boiler house where the chimney is, in flames, so to speak. Here we are dealing with cubistic geometry. It's the house of electricity in a way, and it has a different appearance, maybe appropriately so. Now the Goetheanum, the second Goetheanum in Dornach, that's where all these buildings are. This is a model with all of them. So everything you see in blue was built and designed by Rudolf Steiner. And the central building and the most important one is, of course, the Goetheanum. Here it is. And the Goetheanum derives its name from Goethe. Goethe, who was, the great poet who aspired towards synthesis between art and science. And he was quite good at many things, including scientific observation, if we consider his book, The Theory of Colors. A great European, Goethe, indeed. Now there are, I don't know why I included this link here. If you want to notice it anyway. The truth is, this was a cultural personality of importance, and there are many materials on the web about him. Anthroposophic architecture, because he was the founder of the anthroposophy. I personally have some doubts about underlining anthropos these days, but it depends, because if you consider anthroposophy as a spiritual movement of man, of the human being, that very dimension, spirituality, I think erodes a little, at least a little, the arrogance of a human being who is only concerned with his supremacy on earth and doesn't recognize anything higher than himself on earth. This is the first Goetheanum. Very interesting building, actually, both the first one and the second one. Some, I think that they are rather dark buildings, ideologically or philosophically or even spiritually. yes, there is a certain level of so-called darkness because because of the Gothicism in a way. It was built with volunteers, you know, it was, oh yes, I have some pictures with, it was an adventure, you know, even building the building was an adventure. And I like this very much, you know, these people probably felt very accomplished in the act of erecting these buildings that were to express their philosophy, their ideology, their aspirations, their spirituality. So it was, in a way, an architecture that was a culmination of beliefs that were born from a certain system of thought. We don't do this sort of thing these days, you know. We just build buildings for some other people, but they don't express, you know, philosophical ideas. They are not imbued with more than just the function they need to serve. Perhaps to understand better the architecture, one has to know anthroposophy and read Rudolf Steiner. Ideally, it should be so, yes. Architecture as a synthesis of the arts. This was a book published with the lectures of Rudolf Steiner. Now, who is thinking today about architecture as a synthesis of the arts? Well, most people don't even believe any longer that architecture is an art. Forget about being the synthesis of the arts. But this man, you know, a philosopher, but also a doer and also an architect, thought otherwise. Here he worked with, you know, volunteers, women, most of them. Yes, it's beautiful that you know, something of that spirit that animated the collectivities before the Renaissance happened, you know, not too long ago in a way, you know, about 100 years ago or so. It's a monumental building. This second Goetheanum is impressive both outside and inside. So all these buildings were built by and designed by Rudolf Steiner. I mean, we just look at some pictures, but we can imagine very easily the effort that was made in order to create this building, to make it. You know, it's here is just a photograph, but the building was built. Who taught this man architecture? Nobody. Or you could say, maybe in a rather somehow naive way, God. It's possible, but there are many architects like this, and some of the best, actually. We are going to see also a little later some, well, they are considered artworks now. They actually, his diagrams and inscriptions on blackboards with colored chalk, which are very, very nice, actually, artistically speaking. They didn't have, you know, sophisticated technology, and yet they built it. Probably it is true what he said, you know, that education is about preparing people to be, you know, like free individuals with imagination, free thinking, and in a way, the building itself expresses this. But in the present, as you see, there are chromatic interventions. It is quite powerful and sculptural, as you can see. This building inside makes me think a little bit about some stage design for film that Hans Pelzig did, but also some works also by Hans Pelzig. So there is expressionism here. And expressionism is not very fashionable these days, but that's because most of the time we divorced architecture from any kind of spiritual aspiration. So, you know, we don't believe too much in exaltation. It's hard to believe that such a building was built essentially with volunteers. It's also very possible that many of the things they did here would have been in a more so-called organized society illegal from various points of view. But as Zvi Hecker said, a great building has to be illegal. We saw this one, the boiler room, the boiler house. Another building from the campus. Now, anthroposophical architecture, maybe it's worth exploring again. Let's read what Rudolf Steiner had to say, and let's see if at the end of Anthropocene, if we can imagine an anthroposophical architecture. Here it is, affected by fire, because wood, as we know, is very vulnerable to fire. Now, as I said, I will show also some furniture by Rudolf Steiner, and his furniture is like his buildings, like his architecture. It's cultural, solid, massive even. Could we say that this man was not a talented designer? I don't think we can. He was talented. I mean, look at this desk. You know, it's remarkable in its sculpturalness. Of course, it's not to be mass produced. Of course, it is not inexpensive, but it is a one of a kind piece. Another one of a kind piece. This one interesting as well. He obviously liked design, obviously liked to build. He was not happy with just thinking. He also wanted to do. So this is anthroposophic furniture. Even a lamp, why not? Some artworks, we call them artworks, but they actually, as I said, they were, the result of him giving lectures and, drawing spontaneously with chalks on blackboards. He also did a few paintings, but those that I like the most are not his so-called artworks, but as I said, those notations on blackboards. He aspired to be a universal man in the Renaissance kind of way. doing everything, writing, painting, drawing, building, thinking, publishing books, and so on. In essence, a dreamer, but also a doer, not just a dreamer who lays on the sofa and dreams. No, he was also a doer. And we look at some of his things. This is, sorry about these words in Romanian, The Power of Thought Pictures on Rudolf Steiner's Blackboard. So they are probably well described here as thought pictures, because he visualized his thoughts with color chalk on blackboards, and they were kept, and now they are part of important exhibitions. So there are books. There is a book published, Blackboard Drawings from 1919 to 1924, where, in this engaging form of graphic expression, he was, externalizing his thoughts, knowledge of higher worlds. And here they are. You see the blackboards. And we are going to look in detail at some of them. I like this mixture between words and pictures. And there is a tension, there is even a conflict, it's a vortex of notations showing his own quest, his own struggling with the subject. But what is interesting is that even if they are just, in a way, illustrations of his thought process, they are also aesthetically engaging and even pleasing, and they are provocative. And one might even say that they are beautiful. I personally like them very much. So this is not a dry thought. This is a, if I can say so, a wet thought. It's a burning thought. It's a thought which also manifests aesthetical virtues or attributes or qualities. Well, this is a book published in Romania, Artă și cunoașterea artei, Art and the Knowing of Art. Another blackboard artwork between quotation marks by Rudolf Steiner. A rich life. He earned his life. Most of us, we are concerned with earning a living, but he earned his life more than earning a living. Not that earning a living is easy, it's not. For most of us, it's not. But there is a higher form of earning, and that is earning one's life, not just earning a living. And unfortunately, many people, in the process of earning a living, they do not earn their lives. And I'm not saying it with arrogance, because I know myself how difficult it is to earn a living. But even more difficult, but more rewarding and more important, is to earn one's life. And that's what Rudolf Steiner tried to do in these various forms of living his life. Indeed, here, looking at these pictures, we can say what Michelangelo said, that pittura è una cosa mentale. It's a mental, and then the word concept kind of came from there. So it's not just, drawing pretty pictures. It's about thinking. But it's a thinking which also aesthetically is potent and rich, nourishing. You see here great tension between the word and the image. Somehow these Blackboard visualizations make me think of the drawings of Frederick Kistler. It's a quest for knowledge, for knowing, and I think in the tension between knowing and doing, Rudolf Steiner found his way. Now the Steiner's gravestone at the Goetheanum, this is it. He probably designed it. Maybe, I don't know, or somebody else did, but it's, aesthetically connected with what we already saw in his buildings and furniture designs.